So the next talk is from Guanzhong Chen. He goes by Quantum Online. He has a great blog. I invited him to revise one of his great blog posts about joining an internet exchange and to bring it to a lightning talk format. So thanks so much, Quantum, for accommodating us, and let's get going.
Hello, everyone. I'm Quantum, and I'm honored to speak at Tornok today. We'll be talking about how to join internet exchanges, or IXs for short. So first, a bit about myself. I'm a software developer at Stripe, but that's not why I'm here today. The more relevant thing to know is that I play around with servers quite a bit. I run a hobby network, AES 54148, which I named Dynamic Quantum Networks on a whim, with servers around the world. Why? Because it's fun, and with it, I built a global Anycast DNS cluster and use it to power my homegrown CDN so I can serve my blog to people more efficiently. I'm sure that's a completely sane thing to be doing. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that this lightning talk is based on this blog post of mine. The URL is on the screen. And in the blog post, I get into more details about the process and with an actual demo of my test network, AS200351, joining Onyx, which is an internet exchange in Toronto that I could join from a test VM. I wish I could join Torix for a demo, and once we get into the logistics and the costs of joining IXs, you will see why it'd be crazy to do that for a blog post. But don't let that discourage you if you're running a more serious network in Toronto. I'm sure our sponsor for the day, Torix, will welcome more members. But first, we should probably clarify what an IX is, even though most of you probably know already. As you likely know, the internet is a network of interconnected networks, and connecting two networks so that they can exchange traffic destined to each other is called peering. The point of the internet is to be connected, so naturally networks want to peer with each other, but if you connect a bunch of networks together, it's really inefficient to connect every pair of networks. So the solution is to basically have what's logically a big network switch that everyone connects to. Then everyone can just get onto the peering LAN and have a direct link layer connection to each other. You can run BGP sessions with anyone, exchange traffic, do whatever you want. To save you the trouble from establishing BGP sessions with everyone else's on the IX, there are route servers which act as route reflectors and send your routes to everyone else and everyone else's route to you with just a single BGP session. So that's really what an internet exchange is, a big switch or multiple such interconnected switches and usually route servers to go with it. Now, a word of caution before you join an IX. If you do silly things on a peering LAN, you can potentially screw up live internet traffic and break the internet. Torix, for example, does terabits per second of traffic, and if you did something silly on it, you can potentially mess up internet in the whole province. Then your name might show up in the news, and you might even get shamed in a Cloudflare blog post, and you probably don't want that kind of publicity. There are a few basic rules that most IXs will require you to follow on the peering LAN, and the most basic of which is that only IP and ARP traffic are allowed. Don't do things like multicast or broadcast with the sole exception of ARP and NDP neighbor solicitation, as that's required for MAC discovery. Definitely don't run weird link local protocols, especially not things like DHCP or IPv6 route advertisements, or things like hijacking other people's traffics. Also, don't point default routes at other members of the IX or announce the peering LAN to the internet via BGP. As long as you follow the rules, you should be fine. Otherwise, your port might get blocked or worse. To join an IX, you must first get connected to the big switch. There are two paths to accomplishing this. If you're renting a server from someone, you can ask if the provider will resell an IX port to you. This is typically the easy and cheap way to do it. If you want to build a hobby network and join an IX for fun, that's where I recommend you start. The downside is that you can typically only get small port sizes, and your options are limited to the IXs that your provider can resell. Alternatively, you can go about it on your own, which lets you join any IX that you want. However, you will need to arrange a cross-connect, which is basically a piece of fiber that connects two different customers in a data center. This is usually more expensive, and you will see why in a second. So there are two categories of costs, recurring and non-recurring. Recurring costs can be monthly, usually called MRC in the industry, or annually and YRC, and represents an ongoing cost, while NRC is a non-recurring cost and you only pay once. Depending on the IX, you might be charged either or both kinds of fees and to cover the costs like the switch or the optics used. In most data centers, the cross-connect isn't free either. Depending on the location, you might have to pay MRC or NRC or both to get a cross-connect, and sometimes that cost might be more expensive than the port itself. So, fun story. M6 in Amsterdam was offering free 1 gigabit ports, and I have a dedicated server in Amsterdam for my CDN, So I decided to take them up on the offer. As it turns out, getting a cross-connect in the data center that my server was in had a recurring fee that was like decidedly unaffordable for a hobby network. But fortunately, I could also connect in the data center down the street, which had no recurring fees. Of course, that introduces the different cost of connecting across data centers, which might also be really expensive depending on what you're doing. This will also be required if your desired IX isn't available in your data center. Fortunately for me and my M6 port, my Amsterdam server provider already has a link between the two data centers, so I was able to get it transported to me for free through some convoluted series of VLANs through a bunch of switches. Due to all the complexities involved in connecting things, it's often not possible to just quote a single price on a web page. This is why most of this stuff is contact us for pricing, so you just have to ask. So how do we go about doing this? Well, first, you'll find an IX that makes sense for you to join. You can check peering DB to see if it has the peers that you want and which data centers is available in. That will really help you decide if it's worth the cost. You can also check the IX website to see what requirements they have and whether you meet them. If you're unsure about how to connect, you can always ask the IX in question and your server or colocation provider. Most IXs worth joining are happy to welcome new members, and ideally your server provider actually cares about you enough to help. They will tell you what cross-connects need to be run and all that, and issue a letter of authorization saying that you're allowed to do a cross-connect to their equipment. You can then give this to the data center to run the actual cross-connect in most cases, although some data centers offer you the more interesting option of running the cross-connect yourself. If you are doing connections across data centers, you can probably find someone to give you some kind of L2 connection, perhaps through some kind of VLAN, wave, or dark fiber in the order of increasing cost. Again, the IX and server providers are helpful, and they might even be able to do this for you, as my provider did to transport M6 down the street. Either way, once connected, it's just a regular old interface on your server or router in the end. You configure the static IPs the IX gives you, make sure you aren't doing the forbidden things that I mentioned earlier, and peer with the route servers. That's really it, and you're online. Of course, you can do more. A very common thing to do is to request bilateral peering with other networks. This is most useful when you're dealing with larger networks that want to do their own traffic engineering and don't announce their routes to the route servers. A bunch of these have their own peering portals, such as Amazon, Cloudflare, or Meta, and if the portals don't exist, you can always send them an email. Sometimes other networks will also reach out to you to offer peering. For example, Apple and Hurricane Electric. Actually, Hurricane Electric is quite famous, at least among hobby networks, for sending peering requests the moment they detect that you're joining an IX, often before your port is actually up. So they do this basically every time I join a shared IX. Another thing you can do over an IX is to get IP transit without the additional cross-connect cost. Hurricane Electric is also known for offering anyone free IPv6 transit when you agree to peer, for example. The possibilities are endless. I don't think we'll actually have time to go over which IXs I am on and where, but it's on the slide if you want to give it a read. Yeah, and obviously I'm more biased towards affordability than connectivity. Let's dive a bit more into the whole M6 thing, since I think is the most interesting experience. So after running the cross-connect to the cheap data center down the street, it didn't work due to the fiber being damaged. Shout out to the whole like layer 1 issues earlier. So my provider wasn't receiving any light. It was very fun relaying messages between two Europeans who were up in the middle of the night for me in Toronto. Eventually, I was able to get them to talk to each other directly, and they were able to sort out the situation. So perhaps it's not the best idea to join IXs in a distant time zone for the fun of it. The free AMSIX port ended up being a lot more work than I expected, but hey, at least I got connected to 900 networks. Of course, with great connectivity also comes great problems. A bunch of random ISPs on AMSIX somehow leaked all the routes I announced to the AMSIX route servers to the upstreams, and I had to depeer them using the route server BGP communities. That was fun. At least I wasn't alone since they leaked all the routes on the route servers and it affected a bunch more people, but that's not very comforting news, is it? Another interesting thing is that the cross-connect between the AMSIX reseller and my server provider was actually reused to bring a bunch of other people who also took AMSIX free port offer. So yeah, it's all just a bunch of VLANs on the same piece of fiber, and that's it for today. I'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards and see the link on the screen for more details.